Hey guys, tonight we're leaving behind your cozy modern kitchen and stepping into the cramped, smoky stalls of a medieval street market. The scent of roasting meat mingles with the tang of vinegar-soaked onions, and you're shoulder to shoulder with wool-clad merchants, weary pilgrims, and hungry townsfolk, all jostling for a bite of something hot, fast, and just familiar enough to call comfort food. You're standing in a cobbled alley in 14th century London, surrounded by the clang of iron griddles and the hiss of lard hitting hot stone. Your stomach rumbles, but this isn't a modern food court. You won't find a cheeseburger or pizza slice here. Instead, it's pies stuffed with eels, trenchers dripping with goose fat, and mysterious fritters that somehow smell amazing. Just don't ask what's in them. Also, sorry to say, if you've got a sensitive constitution or you're picky about hygiene, you probably won't survive this. Most of these sellers don't know the word sanitation, and hand washing is more suggestion than rule. But the food, surprisingly addictive, and the variety way more inventive than you'd expect for an era better known for famine than flavor. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your city and local time in the comments. It's always fun to see where and when you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle forward in the line, clutching a wooden token, your only coin for the day's meal. Around you, cooks shout in Middle English, mixing French phrases with local slang in a way that makes your ears strain. The smells, though, those are universal. Fat, sizzling, bread baking, a pinch of something pungent and spicy, peppercorns maybe? Or is that horseradish? You glance over at a stall where a thin man in a leather apron is expertly flipping what looks like a pancake on a blackened iron plate. But it's not sweet, it's filled with leeks and minced offal, all wrapped in a buckwheat batter. He sees your look and gives a wink, tossing a handful of chopped herbs into the mix. You're not sure if that's parsley or something a little more experimental. Behind you, someone hawks hot meat pies, fresh baked, and suddenly the smell shifts. Now it's rich, buttery crust, oozing with some kind of gravy. You catch a glimpse of a steaming golden brown pie with a flaky top crust, and you're tempted. But wait. Your eye catches another treat, one you hadn't expected, a hand-sized pastry called a chewit. It's filled with figs, raisins, and minced lamb, savory and sweet, wrapped up in a neat crimped shell. The woman selling them explains that they're popular with travelers, they keep well, and don't fall apart on bumpy cart rides. As you listen, a man in a fur-lined cap bumps into you and mutters a half apology before joining the queue for pottage. This is the closest thing to a medieval combo meal. A thick stew often made from whatever's on hand, beans, barley cabbage, maybe a few shreds of meat if you're lucky. Some days it's nourishing, other days not so much. The vendor ladles some into a hollowed-out trencher, a slab of stale bread used like a bowl, and hands it over with a wooden spoon. People sit on the stone steps nearby, scooping the last of the stew, and then tearing off the bread, now soaked and soft. No waste. You admire the ingenuity, and the flavor, despite its humble ingredients, isn't bland. Medieval cooks used what they had: onions, garlic, mustard seeds, maybe a splash of vinegar or ale to liven it up. The more you observe, the more you realize this whole scene is fast food in its earliest, earthiest form. You spot fried cheese curds dusted in herbs being sold to children with grubby faces. A cart nearby sells pasties, crescent-shaped dough parcels stuffed with root vegetables, bits of bacon, and in one case a suspiciously dark meat someone insists is coney rabbit. And then there are the fritters. not like the sugary ones you might imagine. These are rough-cut vegetables or fish dipped in batter and dropped in hot fat until crisp. One cook boasts his batter has beer in it, which gives it a special tang. Another swears by crushed walnuts mixed in for texture. You try a bite of one made with apples and sage. It's strange, yes, but somehow comforting. A bell tolls somewhere in the distance, the signal for non-citizens to begin clearing the market before curfew. You clutch your warm pastry tighter. A gentle breeze stirs the smell of burning tallow from a nearby candle seller's cart, and you feel the warmth of your food cutting through the evening chill. You glance down at your clothes. They're not quite right for the time. Your shoes are too clean, your shirt too finely stitched. A few people give you curious looks, but say nothing. Maybe they assume you're some minor noble's odd cousin slumming it for the evening. A toothless old woman sidles up to you, eyes glinting, and offers a miracle tonic in exchange for your half-eaten pie. You politely decline. She shrugs and moves on, hawking her brew to the next unsuspecting customer. Later, you'll learn that it's mostly fermented cabbage water and honey. Not lethal, just unwise. Night falls quickly in the medieval city. The food vendors begin dousing their fires, saving the remaining scraps for tomorrow, or bartering them with stable boys for hay and favors. You notice how central food is to every transaction. It's not just about nourishment. It's currency, comfort, and conversation. And just as you're about to turn down the next alley, a smell arrests you in your tracks. Rich, spicy, and strangely familiar. Could it be? You follow your nose toward a flickering lantern and a narrow doorway. The doorway is low, framed by soot-darkened beams, and a swinging sign above painted with a stylized chicken, though judging by the number of legs it appears to have, the artist may not have seen one up close. You duck your head and step inside. The warmth hits you first, then the noise. This is no market stall, it's a cook shop, one of the earliest forms of an urban takeaway joint. Inside, the air is heavy with steam and smoke, thick with the scent of pepper-burnt drippings and something faintly floral. The fire crackles in a stone hearth, where spits turn lazily suspended by iron hooks. On one, a plump game hen slowly rotates its skin, bronzed and crackling. Below, a tin pan collects the drippings, soon to be ladled into thick slices of rye bread for customers on the go. You aren't here to dine, and few people do. The cook shop is more like a kitchen you borrow. Working people, apprentices, widows, traveling merchants bring ingredients from the market to be cooked for a fee. You watch as a young boy hands over a small burlap sack of mushrooms and 2 salted herring. The cook, a man with scarred forearms and a perpetual squint, nods, takes the offering, and tosses it all into a pan already glistening with mutton fat. Within minutes, the aroma transforms, earthy, briny, irresistible. A woman near the hearth is cradling a shallow dish filled with rissoles, minced meat, mixed with breadcrumbs and spices rolled and fried crisp. They look a bit like flattened meatballs, and you catch a hint of saffron as she bites into one. Saffron. That means money. She must be in someone's service. Only the wealthier kitchens could afford to flavor street food with something that came from flowers hand-picked in far-off places. You slip a coin to the cook and point toward the bubbling pot nearest the wall. He gives a grunt and spoons something onto a wooden trencher, a heap of stewed beans brightened with vinegar and flecks of green sorrel maybe. You take a bite expecting bland mush, but it's tangy and herbaceous. The texture is rough, but the flavor is deliberate. As you eat, your ears tune into the ambient chatter. There's talk of the price of salt fish rising again, of a barren son getting food poisoning from a poorly stuffed haggis, of a baker who was caught stretching his flour with chalk. That last one got a stint in the stocks and a face full of rotten eggs. Food in this world isn't just eaten, it's policed. Guilds regulate who can sell what, where, and when. Bakers must weigh their loaves publicly. Alewives are checked by ale tasters appointed by the town. Even the cookshops like this one are licensed. There are official limits on how much they can charge and what they can serve. But of course, a little bribe here and there goes a long way. The door creaks open behind you, and a new customer enters, cradling a wrapped parcel in linen. She's likely brought a pigeon pie pre-made, only needing to be reheated. The cook takes it, shrugs, and slips it into the corner of the hearth, where the coals glow deep orange. In the meantime, he hands her a mug of posset, a thickened drink made from curdled milk and ale, sometimes sweetened with honey. It's warm, oddly soothing, and often used to lull people to sleep. You make a mental note. Maybe try that before bed sometime. You notice that despite the grime and noise, there's a kind of rhythm to it all. People know when to come, who to pay, and how long it takes for a skewer of liver and onion to be done just right. The regulars joke with the cook. A man at the far bench sings a line from a tavern song about a tart so fine she bit back. It earns him a few chuckles and a slap on the head from his neighbor. Eventually, your curiosity leads you to the corner, where another cook, not part of the shop, but allowed to squat in the shadow of its heat, is boiling a mysterious broth in a blackened kettle. She calls it a traveler's cure. You peer in and spot garlic nettle and something fibrous that might be dried beetroot. She offers a ladleful for a copper. You decline this time, but appreciate her entrepreneurial spirit. Back outside, the night is fully upon the city. The narrow streets gleam under the light of lanterns and oily torches. The last of the day's bread is sold at a discount, yesterday's loaves, they call it, though it was probably baked before dawn. Still, it's fresh enough to pair with something warm. You wander past a small stand where a young couple is selling sops in wine, slices of bread soaked in spiced red wine and served soft like a medieval dessert pudding. A little odd, sure, but not unpleasant. You let a piece melt on your tongue and note the gentle warmth of cinnamon and clove, expensive spices certainly smuggled or rerouted through traders who risked a lot to bring them here. That flavor of risk adventure and faraway places lingers in your mouth long after the bite is gone. You pause at a crossroads where the scents of half a dozen meals mingle. One direction smells sharp and vinegary, probably a pickler's booth. Another is heady with roasted meat. Another still strangely smells of yeast and malt. You follow that one. It leads you to an ale stall, makeshift and jostling, where they sell flatbread wraps filled with boiled eggs and something resembling leeks. The bread is hot, chewy, and slathered in a paste made from ground chickpeas and herbs. You stare for a moment. Chickpeas in medieval England. You learn this stall is run by a foreigner from the eastern Mediterranean, likely from Cyprus or farther east. He speaks little English, but his food has caught on among workers from the docks. It's spicy, portable, and cheap. You try a bite expecting strange textures, but it's rich and balanced, a meal you could walk with. And that, of course, is the whole point. Fast food wasn't always grimy porridge and moldy bread. Sometimes it was fusion cuisine born of necessity and migration. And as you chew, it dawns on you, people have always found ways to make food quick, warm, and worth craving. You wipe your hands on your tunic stomach, now full, and step aside to let a group of stable boys grab their share. Laughter rings through the alley as one of them drops his meal and curses only to have another offer a bite of his in return. As the wind picks up again and the bells toll once more, signaling the final hour before shut-in, you spot something strange on the edge of the market square. A wooden cart with a sign painted in faded red letters, offering fire-baked eel sticks 2 for 1. Curious, you step closer. The eel cart looks like it's seen better centuries. Its wheels wobble with each breeze and the wood is patched with iron nails and bits of string. But it's the smell that draws you, smoky, a little sweet, and faintly reminiscent of a campfire roasting marshmallows. If marshmallows were slippery saltwater creatures. The vendor, a squat man with bright eyes and soot-darkened cheeks, waves you over. He gestures to the skewers laid out across a hot slab of slate, each holding curled, charred sections of eel glistening with a brush of honey and mustard. It's not exactly pretty, but there's an earthy, satisfying sheen to them. He gives you a nod, points to a price scratched into the side of his cart, and when you hand over a few coins, he drops 2 sticks into a sheet of rough cloth and presses them into your hands. You take a cautious bite. The skin is crisp at the edges, the meat flaky and richer than you expect. Not fishy, more like fatty duck with a hint of sweetness. It clings to the stick with just enough stubbornness to make the bite satisfying. You chew slowly, letting the flavor unfold. It's shockingly good. Eels, you quickly realize, are everywhere in medieval cuisine. Rivers teemed with them, and they were easy to catch, easy to store, and required no strict supervision from the church on fasting days. Monks loved them, so did peasants. Even kings indulged. And here at a humble street cart, they're transformed into something almost indulgent. A cluster of children gathers nearby, eyeing the skewers. The vendor tears off smaller pieces and hands them out with a grin. One girl, missing her 2 front teeth, makes a show of devouring hers in one exaggerated bite. The others giggle and follow suit. You find yourself smiling. This is fast food, doing exactly what it's meant to: feeding, delighting, and connecting people. As the embers dim in the cart's hearth, you decide to walk again down streets, winding between buildings, leaning like old friends against each other. Laundry flutters from above, and torchlight bounces across puddles and cobblestones. You follow the scent of vinegar and brine to a small stall flanked by barrels stacked too high. This, it turns out, is a pickling booth, one of the city's answers to food preservation and flavor all in one. A thin man with long fingers offers you a choice: onions soaked in wine vinegar, pickled eggs, salted turnips, or preserved cherries soaked in clove-spiced syrup. You try one of each. The onions are sharp enough to clear your sinuses. The egg, tinged slightly blue from its brine, is smooth and oddly creamy. But it's the cherries that linger, a burst of sweet and spice that cuts through the salt and soot of the night air. The man explains in a lilting accent that some of these recipes are inherited from Roman times. Pickling wasn't just a convenience. It was a necessity, and over time people found a way to make necessity taste good, especially for food on the go. You thank him and move on, passing a tinker's cart and a row of sleeping dogs. At the end of the lane, a small crowd is gathered around a singer perched atop an overturned ale barrel. He strums a lute and sings of a baker's daughter who sold pies so good they were accused of witchcraft. Her secret, he says with a wink between verses, was that she used rosewater and chicken liver in the same crust. Your ears perk up. Rosewater. You've heard of it, but hadn't expected it in something savory. It was, in fact, a common touch in medieval cooking, especially for the wealthy and the ambitious. You make a mental note and wander toward a booth not far from the singer, where the air is fragrant with something both meaty and floral. The baker behind the booth has small, flowery hands and a voice like gravel. She slides a tiny pie onto a flat stone plate and watches you closely as you take a bite. The crust is buttery and flaky, filled with minced poultry almond milk a pinch of cinnamon, and yes, rosewater. It's like eating a medieval version of chicken pot pie crossed with a perfumed custard. Unexpected, complicated, delicious. You nod slowly, savoring it. She doesn't smile, just turns back to her oven and slides another in with a practiced hand. You get the sense she's been perfecting this for years, maybe decades. At a nearby table, a group of night watchmen tuck into something heartier harge. Huff-paste pies made from a crust so hard it's basically inedible, meant only to preserve the meat inside. They crack the crust open like an eggshell and scoop out the contents with chunks of trencher bread. These aren't for the flavor of the pastry. They're for the long-haul meals packed to last days without spoiling. The original meal prep. One of the men catches your eye and offers you a swig of his drink, a pewter flask of ale spiced with ginger and something woodsy. You accept and sip. It burns slightly, but leaves warmth in your chest. You wonder how much of medieval fast food relied on ale not just as a drink, but as a palate cleanser, sanitizer, and social lubricant. A bell rings softly in the distance. Not a church bell this time, more likely the warning bell for closing stalls. The curfew is inching closer. You turn a corner and stumble upon a group of early risers already setting up for tomorrow. One woman grinds oats in a heavy stone mill, prepping them for frumenty, a kind of porridge usually made for travelers and farmhands, thickened with broth or milk, and often eaten with honey or boiled meat. Her son hands you a sample spoonful. It's surprisingly filling, warm with cracked wheat and the faint taste of beef marrow. There's a sense of quiet calm here at the edge of the market's breath. The stalls are half lit. The fires are mostly down to embers. The night has thinned, and the first signs of tomorrow simmer at the fringes. Still, your journey isn't done. Somewhere deeper in the maze of alleys and smells and smoke, you catch a fleeting scent, warm bread, sharp cheese, and the unmistakable sizzle of something hitting hot iron. You follow it, not rushing, just letting your full belly and curious mind carry you forward. The scent grows stronger as you pass under a crooked archway and into a courtyard lit by a single iron lantern. A man is crouched beside a brazier, fanning coals with a bellows made from goatskin. Sparks flutter upward, casting golden light on the walls around him. On the griddle above, something hisses and pops, thin round cakes the size of your hand flecked with herbs and what looks like curdled cheese. He looks up, eyes bleary but kind, and gestures you closer. You watch as he flips one of the cakes with the corner of a flat wooden paddle. The underside is mottled brown and crisp, while the top oozes softly as it cools. He breaks one open for you and hands it over wrapped in cloth. It's hot and fragrant cheese onion, maybe even chopped greens. It smells simple but comforting. You bite in, and the outside crackles, giving way to creamy curds and the bite of chives. It's rustic humble, exactly what a stonemason or washerwoman might have eaten between shifts. No fork, no plate, no cutlery, just hand to mouth, then back to work. You realize that convenience in eating isn't a modern invention. People have always needed fuel on the fly. He tells you it's called a cheese flaidon, though names vary from town to town. The batter is made from rye flour curds, from yesterday's milk, chopped greens, a pinch of salt, if he has any left, and whatever else is lying around. Some days it's nettles, some days it's kale, occasionally bits of smoked pork if he's lucky. You thank him and sit on a nearby step to eat, tucking your legs in close against the evening chill. The stone beneath you is warm from the day's sun slowly cooling, and you breathe in the last of the night air mingled with coal smoke and cooking fat. A stray cat brushes past your leg, eyeing your flaidon with a little too much interest. You tear off a corner and toss it to her. She devours it, and vanishes into the shadows like a phantom. From this quiet perch, you listen. Somewhere far off, a rooster crows prematurely. A baby cries from an open upper window. Two drunks laugh as they stagger past one of them clutching a half-eaten pie. You smile. The world may feel ancient and foreign, but hunger and laughter remain familiar. You rise and begin walking again, drawn now by the soft clatter of wooden bowls and tin mugs. Another courtyard opens ahead, this one busier with benches lined under a low wooden awning. Lanterns flicker at each corner. This is a night feeder's haven, a place for cart drivers, stable hands, and wandering minstrels to grab a warm bite before sleeping in straw. A woman tends to a bubbling cauldron set over open flame. She's stirring what looks like a thick mash of oats, but she beckons you over and lifts a wooden lid from a second pot. This one holds mortrews, a type of meat mash favored by those with few teeth and little time. Minced pork or chicken, pounded with breadcrumbs, stock and spices until smooth, then fried into thick patties or eaten as a paste. Oddly modern, you think. Like a medieval meatloaf without the ketchup. She serves you a scoop with a hunk of rye bread. The texture is soft, but the taste is layered sage black pepper, maybe even a bit of mace. You chew slowly, imagining the hundreds of travelers who've eaten this exact meal year after year, town after town. Nearby, a boy slices apples into wedges and dips them into a mixture of vinegar and honey before handing them to passers-by. His fingers are sticky, his grin wide. One of the stable hands tosses him a copper and takes a whole handful. You follow suit. The vinegar hits first sharp and bracing, followed by the mellow sweetness of apple and a lingering floral note from the honey. The boy's mother stands behind him, tending to a basket of frumenty cakes, cold-pressed discs of cracked wheat mixed with dried fruits and sweetened with treacle. Travelers often take them on the road. They're chewy, dense, and surprisingly satisfying. She gives you one to try, and it tastes like a cross between trail mix and molasses bread, the kind of thing you'd snack on slowly over miles. As you chew, you strike up a conversation with a man wearing a patched cloak and a merchant's hat. He tells you he's come from Norwich, carrying bolts of dyed wool, and swears the best fast food in all England comes from the monastery guest houses. The monks, he says, make a cheese pie with fresh mint and almonds, so good that even pilgrims break their vows to get a second slice. You make a note of it, not sure if you'll ever get that far, but the idea of monastic fast food intrigues you. You picture quiet cloisters, stone ovens, and rows of pies cooling on windowsills, and then a rather sacrilegious thought crosses your mind. Maybe the monks were the original foodies. The night deepens. A cart rattles past, pulled by a donkey, too tired to care about the shouting boy perched behind him. The sound fades, and all that remains is the gentle murmur of the courtyard. The food stalls are closing now. Pot lids clatter shut. Coals are covered in ash. You sip a final cup of warmed ale and feel it settle in your stomach like a lullaby. Just as you're about to leave, a soft whistle carries through the air. You follow it on instinct. Around the corner, tucked behind the side of a chapel, a small pop-up stand, if you can call it that, has appeared. Two young girls are selling griddle sops, slices of yesterday's bread dipped in milk and egg, then fried on a slate with goose fat until golden. Essentially, it's French toast centuries before France claimed it. They serve it with a dab of jam made from boiled damson plums. You eat it with your fingers warm and sticky, and suddenly the line between old and new blurs completely. This isn't history. This is breakfast, and it's delicious. The girls giggle and thank you for the coin before vanishing into the alley with their griddle. No permits, no signs, just food made hot and fast for those who know where to look. You smile again, brushing crumbs from your lap as you return to the road. The stars are clearer now, the air cooler. Somewhere far off, a bell begins to toll again. Midnight, perhaps, or just a warning for the night's end. But you're not done yet. You still haven't tried the fish pies. The fish pies are calling, and your feet, though, beginning to ache from hours of cobblestone wandering, find new rhythm as you move toward the wharves. The river is wide here, sluggish in the dark, its surface dappled with moonlight, and the dim reflections of lanterns swinging from mooring poles. The scent in the air changes, less smoke, more salt, and something briny that curls into your nose like seaweed at low tide. Fishermen and dock workers gather around makeshift stalls where barrels serve as tables, and the meals here are unapologetically rustic. You spot a woman pulling steaming pastries from a battered iron oven balanced on bricks over an open flame. Her apron is soaked, her arms flour-dusted. She hums as she works, not looking up as you approach. The sign nailed to her table reads, "Pies of haddock and herb tuppence." One of her children, barely old enough to walk, holds up a pie the size of your palm. It's wrapped in rough parchment, warm and fragrant. You buy two. You settle on a low bench nearby and take a bite. The crust is buttery and thin, more a vessel than a focus. Inside, soft flakes of haddock are mixed with parsley chopped spring onions, and surprisingly, a hint of nutmeg. It's not fishy, not at all. Just savory, clean, and light on the tongue. You chew slowly, letting the herbs linger. Someone beside you grumbles about rising costs. "Used to be half the fish, twice the pie," he says between bites. But it's clear he still finds comfort in it. A few others gather around, sharing small barrels of beer and passing pie crusts to a shaggy black dog that wags its tail enthusiastically. You finish your pie and watch the dock workers as they shift crates and check ropes. Some wear padded jerkins, others tunics stained with years of salt and grime. One man eats while working, balancing a cup of thick soup on a barrel, while his other hand clutches a wooden spoon. It smells like a chowder, creamy herby with bits of fish and root vegetables floating in its depths. Behind him, a boy pours warm broth from a blackened kettle into tin mugs for the crew. You try a sip. It's smooth and surprisingly refined, likely made with eel bones, leeks, and white pepper. You're struck again by how sophisticated this food is, even in the humblest of places. Just past the boats, a cluster of vendors specializes in food for travelers by river. One cart sells bundles wrapped in dried cabbage leaves. Portable pottages, the vendor calls them. Inside each is a mash of barley-dried peas and herbs held together by fat and breadcrumbs. Like a medieval energy bar built to last days on a boat. You sample one, biting into the dense filling. It's chewy, earthy, and satisfying with the mild sweetness of parsnip, balanced by the tang of vinegar-soaked mustard seeds. It might not win a beauty contest, but as far as road food goes, it's a masterpiece of practicality. Another stall nearby has set up a selection of dried goods, smoked eels twisted into coils, jerky made from venison, and boar strips of dried apple and plum sealed in waxed cloth. You buy a small pouch of the fruit and chew on a piece of plum that's been soaked in wine before drying. It's tart and leathery, but addictive. You can see why someone might nibble on it throughout a long journey. A young girl with soot-smudged cheeks offers you a wooden skewer with small round lumps of fish cake speared along it. Ling fritters, she explains, with sage and oats. You take a bite and taste a satisfying crunch, followed by soft, peppery warmth. she beams and disappears back into the crowd, barefoot and fleet. Now and again, you catch snippets of song workers singing as they unload barrels, sea shanties drifting lazily through the mist. Some are indecipherable, others oddly familiar in their rhythm and rhyme. You hear one chorus that seems to list every food the singer's eaten in the last week: boiled herring-fried sprats, eel pies, cold pasties, oat cake, dried cherries. A culinary diary in song. You rise again, feeling the warmth of food in your belly, and follow a trail of laughter and clinking mugs toward the edge of the market. Here, beneath the eaves of a leaning tavern, another fire burns. The sign above the door is worn beyond recognition, but people know it by smell. This stall serves Branny's dense, peppery sausage rolls made with offal barley and a thick casing of crust. They're eaten hot, preferably after a long shift or a long night. A boy hands you one with a glazed look on his face as if he's eaten 3 and still isn't satisfied. The first bite is intense black pepper fat and something gamey. Not for the faint of heart, but deeply filling. The vendor tells you they're popular with watchmen and shepherds who need something hearty to keep them full on cold nights. As you chew, a man with wild hair and bare feet climbs onto a crate and begins preaching about gluttony. Beware the belly that never says enough, he calls before helping himself to a pie from a distracted vendor's tray. No one seems to mind. He's known, it seems, and gently ignored. You rest against a post. Bellyful, eyes heavy, watching the world turn slowly in its quiet clockwork. Even in a time where hardship loomed large, the joy of food, quick, hot, and satisfying, endured. And as you close your eyes for a moment, you imagine waking up in another corner of the city where baked apples stuffed with dates await you. But not yet. Not just yet. You've got a little more wandering to do. You stir, slowly lulled awake by the creak of cartwheels and the unmistakable crackle of something roasting on an open flame. Your hand brushes the folds of your tunic where crumbs still linger, and the scent in the air has changed again now, heavy with sugar spice and warm apples. The first glint of morning halos the rooftops in gold, and the market is waking in waves. Bakers stretch their arms and roll dough with sleepy focus. Muck rakers clear the previous night's refuse with wide brooms. And in the space between sleep and labor, a little magic happens, the early risers' breakfast stalls. You drift toward a group of vendors who've set up narrow tables beside the outer wall of a granary. A large iron pan sizzles over hot coals, and nestled inside are round golden brown apples baked in their skins, then split and stuffed with a mix of chopped dates, breadcrumbs, cinnamon, and honey. The vendor, a young man with soot on his cheeks, and a gentle voice, sees your curious glance and grins. Best way to start the day, he says, ladling syrup from a pot onto the baked apples. You accept one wrapped in cloth and take a careful bite. The skin yields easily, giving way to warm, spiced fruit that clings to your tongue like syrupy silk. It's sweet, but not cloying, rich, but balanced. He tells you it's a favorite among both clergy and commoners. Dates and honey may be precious, but a single apple split 4 ways stretches the pleasure. He sells his for a modest coin and usually runs out before mid-morning. At a neighboring stall, a woman is ladling what she calls morning pottage into wooden bowls, oats simmered in milk with rosemary bay and shards of dried apple. You watch as she presses a wedge of hard cheese into the side of each bowl. The heat softens the cheese, letting it melt slightly into the grain. You taste a spoonful, herby, creamy, with the sharp tang of the cheese hitting just after the sweetness of the apple. It's unlike anything you've eaten before, but feels oddly familiar. Like a cousin to risotto or cheesy porridge, the kind of thing you'd dream up on a rainy day and then fall asleep halfway through eating. A young apprentice beside you gulps his portion down and tells you he has only minutes before the tannery opens. "This'll keep me straight till dusk," he adds proudly, then dashes off with half a loaf of black bread in one hand. You linger a while longer, sipping a warm cup of small ale, a weak brew made especially for breakfast with barely enough alcohol to matter, but just enough to ward off tainted water. It tastes faintly of barley and river stone, but it's cold and welcome. Across the alley, a small girl is selling what look like brown flat pastries stacked in pairs and dusted with ground nuts. You approach, and she offers you one for a coin, explaining in halting words that they're honey cakes made with oat flour and walnut oil. You bite into one, it crumbles at the edges, sweet and chewy in the center, with the lingering flavor of crushed hazelnuts and roasted grain. Her mother, busy at a nearby bench, waves without looking up. She's slicing cured meat thinly, so thin it looks like parchment, and layering it between leaves of sour cabbage. "For workers' pockets," she says without prompting. "Meat keeps better this way. Doesn't sweat." She wraps one of the bundles in linen and presses it into your hand. "It's cool, salty, and just a little sour." You take a bite and imagine the hundreds of men and women who've eaten this exact combination while digging ditches, weaving wool, or laying brick. You pass by a small boarding house where a board has been propped against the doorway. "Hot peas, pickled onions, and toast," it reads in large scratched letters. Inside, a boy carries trays to guests who've paid for the simplest breakfast possible. A bowl of soft-cooked yellow peas drizzled with vinegar and eaten with toasted bread. One of the earliest cheap eats and still satisfying. The innkeeper explains that traveling traders often grab this before heading to the city gate. "Fills the gut, won't slow the feet," he mutters as he pours another bowl. Outside again, a dog licks the remains of a trencher tossed in a gutter, and a monk haggles over the price of boiled eggs at a cart nearby. The egg seller has a small pot of mustard set on the counter and dips the eggs before handing them over. You try one simple firm and just spicy enough to wake your senses, and then you see it. Something you didn't expect. A woman with a painted cart and bright ribbons in her hair is selling mock fish, a vegetarian concoction made from almonds, herbs, and bread paste sculpted into the shape of fish and fried golden. "Lenten food," she explains, "for when the church forbids meat." You take a bite and it's astonishing. Crisp on the outside, creamy on the inside, with the flavors of lemon balm and ground nuts. Not a fish at all, but something just as satisfying. She laughs and says nobility sometimes prefers these to the real thing. "Less bones, more butter," she shrugs. You finish it slowly, letting the last bite linger. The flavors are lighter in the morning, less fat, more herb, but no less thoughtful. Even centuries before the idea of brunch, medieval folk had their own ways to ease into the day. And as the sun finally crests the rooftops and the clamor of daily life grows louder, you turn one last corner and find yourself beneath the baker's open shutter. A tray of small buns rests on the sill, their tops golden and blistered, dotted with herbs and coarse salt. You reach out warm bread still steaming in your hand and take a slow bite. It's rosemary and lard crisp crust giving way to soft crumb, the kind of taste that makes you forget you're walking through another century. You lean against the wall and close your eyes. The street buzzes around you, carts, creaking birds, chirping merchants shouting. But for now, all you know is warm bread and the way the day begins. But soon the smell of roasting fowl will return to the air, and you're not quite finished exploring. You leave the baker's window behind, with the last flakes of salt clinging to your fingers. stepping once more into the slow churn of the waking city. The streets grow louder now, not chaotic yet, but fuller voices blend. Cartwheels clatter, and somewhere a blacksmith's hammer begins its morning rhythm. And beneath it all, once again, comes the smell of roasting meat. It starts faint, just a note in the air, a whisper of wood smoke and sizzling skin, and then grows as you walk. Past the coopers bending iron bands around barrels, past the washerwomen slapping cloth against worn stones, past a pair of children drawing in the dust with bits of charcoal. The scent draws you onward like a thread. Eventually, you find the source, a cook fire in the corner of a square near the town's guild hall. A man in a soot-streaked apron turns spits lined with birds' chickens, surely, but perhaps also goose pigeon, even jackdaw. It's hard to tell. The fire dances beneath them, juices hissing as they drip onto the coals. But this isn't just for the wealthy. He's selling slices, not whole birds, carved directly from the roasting meat and dropped onto slabs of bread. There's no plate, no garnish, just hot flesh, steaming and dripping, nestled into yesterday's loaf. You pay your coin, and he asks only herbs, or plain, you say herbs. He nods, grabs a handful of something green and bruised lovage, perhaps, or parsley, and sprinkles it over the meat before handing it to you. You take a bite, and the flavor rushes in smoke salt fat, and the sharp bite of whatever wild green he tossed on top. There's nothing refined about it. No glaze, no sauce. But it's honest, and it fills your mouth and belly with warmth. Around you, others eat the same way, leaning against walls, sitting on steps, elbow deep in hot bread and meat. A blacksmith eats his with one hand while tightening a mule's harness with the other. A washerwoman balances her meal on her knee while nursing a baby. No table, no time. Just nourishment in motion. Behind the fire, another man works at a different station, a boiling cauldron with hunks of what looks like lamb simmering in ale and onions. Every so often, he ladles the liquid into wooden bowls and tops them with a spoonful of pungent yellow mustard. You try a sample, and it's hearty, almost like a stew, but thinner with the sharpness of mustard cutting through the richness of the meat. A pick-me-up in a bowl. This is the food of labor, and it changes with the seasons. In summer, more herbs and lighter broths. In winter, thicker gravies, more offal and preserved root vegetables. Nothing is wasted. The idea of nose to tail isn't trendy here, it's survival. You sit for a moment on a low stone step, chewing slowly, and overhear two men arguing over the merits of goose grease versus pig fat for frying fritters. One swears goose gives a crisper bite. The other insists pig adds flavor. They both laugh when the cook interrupts and says, "Depends on who's eating it." Down the street, a different kind of vendor is setting up shop. No fire, just baskets of bread and cheese wrapped in linen chunks of dried sausage and hand pies tied with twine. This is the traveling merchant's stop where food is sold to be packed and carried. You examine one of the pies, round and surprisingly heavy for its size. The vendor unwraps it to reveal a thick crust and a dense filling of peas leeks and bits of ham, all bound with a custard made from egg and almond milk. He explains that it's baked in a lidded pot sealed with a paste of flour and water and left to cook in the embers of a shared hearth. It keeps for days. Travelers eat a slice cold with dried fruit or softened with a splash of ale. You buy one and tuck it into your satchel, then nibble on a sliver of hard cheese, dry, crumbly, salty enough to make your mouth water. A young boy offers you a sliver of dried fig in exchange, and you trade with a smile. A few streets over, in the shadow of the stone churchyard, a group of apprentices has gathered around a woman selling bread with drippings. She slices rough brown loaves and ladles on the cooled fat, skimmed from last night's roasts. now thick and jelly-like, flecked with black pepper and chopped onions. It's not refined, but it glistens under the morning sun and smells like indulgence. You accept a slice, the fat melting into the bread as you bite. It's rich, earthy, and far more flavorful than anything you'd expect from leftovers. The woman nods knowingly and tells you her secret, a pinch of nutmeg and a splash of cider vinegar mixed into the drippings. Just a drop, she says, but it wakes it up. You laugh quietly and nod, savoring it to the last bite. As noon draws closer, the market swells. More people now, more carts, more dogs. The quiet of the early morning replaced with a midday din. You walk slowly, full but curious, letting your eyes drift from stall to stall. You pass a young woman selling bundles of boiled greens tied with twine and stuffed with mashed peas and garlic. A friar nearby sells slices of dark rye spread with a paste made from crushed lentils, onions, and herbs, a Lenten favorite full of protein light on indulgence. You taste one and find it surprisingly smooth with a bright flavor from pickled parsley stirred in. Nearby, an older woman offers you a bowl of something called blancmange. You hesitate. It looks like porridge, pale and thick, but she assures you it's a noble recipe. Made from shredded chicken, almond milk, rice, and sugar, it's a luxury trickled down to the street through kitchen apprentices and frugal cooks. You taste it. Creamy, subtly sweet with a whisper of cinnamon. Not what you expected at all. Almost elegant. You thank her and step aside, watching a pair of jugglers entertain a small crowd in front of a stall selling roasted chestnuts and fried herbs in batter. You watch the steam rise from the chestnuts as they crack open, releasing their nutty perfume into the bustling air. You take one. Warm, soft, faintly sweet. Perfect. And then across the crowd, something catches your eye. A spit turning not birds, not lamb, but something else entirely. Something you hadn't considered. And as you make your way toward it, weaving between peddlers and children, and the clang of church bells in the distance, you realize you haven't tried hedgehog yet. It takes a moment to convince yourself you're not mistaken. But there it is, nestled beside the fire, slowly turning on a spit, too small for a goose and too large for a rabbit, is the unmistakable shape of a hedgehog. Its spines have been carefully singed off the body, wrapped in clay, and now it bakes slowly, cracking along the edges, where steam escapes and releases an herbal fragrance that's not unpleasant. The cook, a tall man with one eye and an apron that's seen too many spills, grins at you. A delicacy, he assures, carving off a sliver of the meat and offering it on the tip of a wooden knife. Poor folks' pork, we call it. You hesitate, then accept. The meat is surprisingly tender, mild, like young rabbit or a lean cut of pork, but with an earthy aftertaste, likely from the clay baking method, which traps not just moisture, but flavor. He seasoned it with thyme, sage, and marjoram, and the result is different, yes, but oddly satisfying. You learn that this is no everyday dish. Hedgehog is eaten when opportunity allows, when the hunt is lucky, or when the fields yield nothing else. Sometimes it's a dish reserved for festivals or countryside celebrations, where peasants make do with what nature offers. Cooked in clay, the prickles come off with the hardened shell, leaving a clean roast beneath. As he wraps another piece for a waiting customer, you ask about other unusual meats. He rattles them off: squirrel, badger, rook, crow, even swan, though that one's reserved for nobles. You grimace at a few, but he shrugs. Everything's food when your belly's empty. And he's right. The medieval diet wasn't just dictated by taste, it was shaped by necessity, the church calendar, the seasons, and the strict hierarchies of who could eat what. You move on, mulling over that truth as the crowd thickens around you. Down a narrow passage tucked behind a cooper's stall, you find a woman selling small meatballs skewered between slices of stale bread. They're made from liver oats, onions, and blood. Black puddings on a stick, she calls them. Not sausages exactly, but rich and hearty, packed with flavor and calories. You buy one and chew slowly, the iron taste of blood softened by onion and the grains bite. It's not a dish that pretends to be delicate. It's direct, unapologetic, and useful food for hard work and harder winters. Beside her, a man stirs a bubbling pot of something darker. He offers you a taste broth of tripes boiled with root vegetables, vinegar, and crushed barley. You brace yourself, but the result is surprisingly savory. Strong, sure, but spiced, balanced, warming. The kind of thing you'd want after hours in cold fields. As you finish your cup, you notice another trend unfolding nearby. A series of booths with signs drawn in crude symbols, fish grain, and leaves marking them as fasting stalls. Today isn't a fast day, but many still observe the tradition, whether out of piety or thrift. These stalls specialize in mock meats, plant-based replicas made with surprising skill. You pause at a table where a young nun sells false eggs, balls of almond paste dyed yellow in the middle with saffron, and wrapped in bits of cooked rice to mimic the texture of egg white. You try one. It's sweet, creamy, and bizarrely convincing. Not an egg by taste, but somehow close enough in spirit to fool the tongue. She smiles as you nod, then offers you a slice of false bacon strips of smoked fish pressed with red beet, and salt served cold on bread. It's salty and smoky with just a hint of sweetness. These foods, she explains, were often used in monasteries and devout households to keep to the church's many fasting days without sacrificing comfort. Food was still joy, even when meat was forbidden. You make your way back to the main lane, stopping next at a stall run by a pair of brothers frying flat cakes in oil. Leek pancakes, they call them, simple discs of flour water, chopped leeks, and wild garlic. Crisp at the edges, soft in the center, and deeply flavorful thanks to the fresh greens. You eat one standing beside a cart driver who dips his into a bowl of sour cream with crushed walnuts. From the Polish Quarter, he says through a mouthful, "Best thing I've had all week." And that's when it strikes you how international this fast food scene really is. Even in a small medieval town, culinary threads from all over Europe and beyond wove their way into daily diets. Trade routes brought spices, new crops, and recipes from the Mediterranean, the Middle East, even distant India. You spot traces of this everywhere. Saffron in pies, pepper in puddings, cinnamon in stews, lemons and rice and dates in dishes far from their point of origin. The world was bigger than it seemed, and even the humblest meat pie carried echoes of distant lands. You follow a scent now familiar, sweet, and fried, and find a vendor ladling dough into hot oil. He's making fritters again, but these are different, round, golden, and coated in crushed almonds and honey. Dessert, finally. He calls them Darioli's fried dough balls filled with custard and rolled in spiced sugar. One bite and the outside gives way to creamy sweetness with a note of rosewater. It's rich, indulgent, and fleeting. He tells you they're a festival treat usually eaten after church fairs or weddings. But when ingredients allow, he makes small batches to sell. Keeps the neighbors sweet, he says with a wink. You buy a second one and carry it with you as you leave the square, letting the sugar stick to your fingertips and the custard warm your tongue. Around the corner, a woman hums as she roasts nuts over an open flame, hazelnuts, almonds, and what she calls spiced chickpeas. She offers you a cone made from waxed parchment. You accept feeling the heat through the paper and pop a few into your mouth. Crunch, salt, smoke, a perfect ending. But as you dust your hands and round another corner, the wind carries a new scent, something rich and familiar laced with garlic and wine. It seems a stew pot is waiting just ahead. The scent is impossible to ignore, meaty, deep redolent of garlic and herbs that cling to the air like smoke in a chapel. You follow it into a narrow lane that opens into a cloistered courtyard, half in shadow, half painted with sun. At its center, a wide pot simmers over a fire, so low it looks more like glowing breath than flame. The woman tending the pot is older, with sleeves rolled to the elbows and a braid looped twice around her head. She lifts the lid, and the aroma billows outward: wine onions, marrow bones, and herbs you recognize by scent, but not by name. She serves you a wooden bowl of the thick, reddish stew. "It's ragu," she says, "but poor folks' style. No beef, just rabbit leeks and what herbs I could find." You thank her and sit beside a crumbling stone wall, steam curling upward into your face as you blow gently over the bowl. The first taste is rich but surprisingly clean, no cream, no fat floating at the surface. Just deep broth, earthy leeks, and the soft bite of meat so tender it breaks apart under the spoon. Somewhere in there, cloves and garlic, tamed by time over flame. Around you, others eat in silence, letting the warmth of the food do all the talking. There's no pretense here. It's not food to impress, but food to remember. The kind that stays with you, not on your tongue, but in your bones. The woman tells you the stew is based on a Roman recipe passed down by monks. The brothers keep the old ways, she says, handing another bowl to a passing carpenter. They say stew is for souls, not stomachs. You nod slowly, thinking she might be right. After finishing the last sip of broth, you rise and step back into the sun, blinking as your eyes adjust. A bell chimes overhead midday now, and the tone brings a new rhythm to the streets. The pace quickens. Children run with baskets. Merchants haggle louder. Everyone seems to have somewhere to be. You wander toward the church green, where another kind of meal is unfolding. Not stew this time, but pastries, rows of them cooling on a wide table draped in linen. A traveling baker has set up shop for the day, offering both savory and sweet marrow pies, filled with bone marrow and breadcrumbs, egg tarts with saffron and sugar, and something called a spiced coffin, a pastry box filled with minced pork, ginger, and dried cherries. You choose the latter. It's warm in your hand, the crust thick and strong like a bread shell. You break it open, and the filling releases a cloud of sweet, meaty steam. The flavors are shockingly bold, tangy from the fruit, fiery from the ginger, soft from the pork. It's unlike anything modern you've tasted, and yet it makes perfect sense. Beside you, a pair of young lovers shares a pear tart. The fruit you overhear has been poached in wine, then baked into a crust made of almond flour and lard. Their hands meet as they break the tart in two. You glance away and bite into your pie again. A short walk farther, and you pass a group of friars handing out free loaves, rough brown bread with a crust thick as armor. For those with no coin, the friars bake daily from flour donated by nearby mills. It's simple, and it's enough. You accept a slice and notice the way the inside smells faintly of sour beer and ash. You eat it slowly, grateful. Now through the trees near the edge of the green, you spot a line of women in aprons and shawls, arranging cakes on a wooden shelf balanced atop two barrels. These aren't cakes like you'd imagine, no frosting, no fluff. These are herb cakes, bean patties, and nut loaves. Their function is twofold: to feed and to fortify. You buy an herb cake with sage rosemary and crushed walnut. It's dry, but the flavor unfolds slowly, especially when chased with a sip of weak ale. A merchant beside you dunks his into soup and explains, "You eat these when you've no time to stop." They hold their shape even in your pocket. As the sun climbs higher, you find yourself in a district where butchers and tanners work. And here the fast food takes a different turn. A cart rumbles past, with trays of head cheese, pressed meat, and jelly made from the boiled heads of pigs flavored with mustard seed and vinegar. The cart vendor slices off thin slabs and serves them cold with pickled cabbage and hard bread. You try a bite. The texture is unusual, but the flavor is bright and sharp, the tang of vinegar balancing the richness. Another surprise. Another success. You sit for a moment on a low wall nibbling dried pears and watching two boys duel with sticks while an older woman yells at them to stop before they split each other's heads like Sunday custards. You smile. Even that imagery is culinary. In the distance, you spot a final booth tucked beneath the awning of a tailor's shop. A man there serves only one item, small hand pies filled with lentils and fennel seed. He sells them for a single coin, and each is shaped like a half moon. You buy one and lean against the stone as you eat. The crust is rough but crisp, and the filling is both warm and refreshing. The lentils are soft but not mushy, the fennel adding a cooling finish that stays on the breath. As you chew, you hear him say to another customer, "My grandmother made these when we had no meat. Said it kept the spirit strong." You glance down at the little pastry in your hand, now almost gone, and think she was probably right. You wipe your hands, your mouth, your thoughts. The afternoon is here, the sky a gentle blue-gray. The day is aging and the markets are beginning to settle. But there's still time for more. The scent of honey ginger and something gently floral wafts from around the corner. You follow it almost dreamily deeper into the belly of the city, where sweet things are made not just to eat, but to celebrate. The scent leads you through a quieter lane where the bustle gives way to a more purposeful calm. This isn't the frantic energy of morning markets, or the slapdash chatter of hungry laborers. Here, the pace slows. You hear the soft tapping of a spoon against copper, the rustle of linen over baskets, and the humming of a melody too old to place. You find yourself before a stall decorated with dried flowers and hanging ribbons. Beneath its awning, jars of amber and gold glow in the afternoon light, honeys, syrups, flower waters, and preserves all catching the sun like little pieces of treasure. Behind the table stands a woman with hands as quick as they are the gentle, folding bits of pastry into tight triangles and brushing them with egg wash. These are gingerbreads, she tells you, though not the cookies you might imagine. This is medieval gingerbread, a dense, chewy sweet made from breadcrumbs soaked in honey spiced with ginger cinnamon and sometimes black pepper, then pressed into shapes and dusted with sugar or cloves. She offers you a small piece cut into a diamond and wrapped in fig leaf. You bite down and find it intensely rich. Sweet, yes, but more than that. Spicy in a warming way, almost medicinal. A confection born not for children, but for festivals, fairs, and noble tables. You chew slowly, letting the spices spread across your tongue. She shows you another treat, marchpane or marzipan made from almond meal and rosewater molded into little fruits and glazed with sugar syrup. A favorite at weddings and holidays. You taste one shaped like a pear, its sugary shell giving way to soft, fragrant paste inside. It dissolves delicately, floral and nutty. A boy nearby holds out a tray with leech, a soft jelly made from milk sugar and almond milk set firm and sliced into cubes, each dusted with herbs or petals. You try one and it's cool and smooth with a faint hint of aniseed, refreshing in a quiet, unexpected way. These sweets, you realize, aren't just food, they're celebration ceremony. They take time, rare ingredients, and no small amount of care. Even among street vendors, you can sense the reverence behind them. Not meant for hurried bites, but slow enjoyment. A luxury even in miniature. As you thank the woman and begin to leave, she places a wrapped parcel in your hand. "Damson paste," she says, "for the walk." You smile and tuck it away, thick fruit preserved and spiced until it holds like toffee meant to soften the hours. You move on following the scent of warm spice through the alley, where the sound of bell chimes and distant music beckons you toward what looks like a small gathering or fair. Colorful cloths hang from beams, and children run between stalls as jugglers perform. A feast day, perhaps, or a saint's name day. You're not sure, but something is being celebrated. At the center of it all is a long table groaning under the weight of confections. Tarts of Warden pears poached in red wine and baked into open-faced pastries with custard and spice. Succat or candied fruits steeped in syrup and displayed like jewels. And dragees, tiny spiced seeds, sugared and colored, offered in little cones of parchment. You try a tart. The pear is melting the wine rich, the custard delicate. You chew slowly, watching the fare unfold around you. Laughter, music, the shuffle of feet. Even here, amid play and spectacle, food weaves through it all. Not as mere fuel, but as memory, as tradition, as joy. A little farther, a vendor sells rose cakes, sponge-like rounds flavored with rose water, and eggs sometimes colored with beetroot or powdered herbs. They're surprisingly light, almost modern in their texture. You nibble one while standing beneath a string of lanterns, swaying gently in the breeze. A friar passes with a basket of sops and wine. A dish from hours ago, still warm, made from bread soaked in spiced wine and topped with dried fruit. A portable pudding of sorts. He offers you a spoonful, and you accept. It's soft, like memory itself. Faint sweetness, soft acidity, spice you can't quite name. You sit then on the edge of a fountain, watching two women fry dough wafers over iron presses, carving lacy designs into the batter. They fold them while still warm and sprinkle them with rose sugar. You accept one, careful not to crumble it, and take a bite so gentle it barely makes a sound. And for a moment, you forget where or when you are. Because sweetness like this, shaped with such care, could belong to any century. It crosses time. You imagine a traveler from long ago pausing as you do now, to taste and be still. But just then the sound of a crier pulls you back. A man in heavy boots and a padded cap strides through the square, calling out the arrival of a shipment of lemons at the city gates. Imported. Expensive. Rare. You follow the growing crowd to a stall already bustling with curious faces. Here a cook is experimenting, slicing lemons thin, soaking them in honey, and serving them with fried fish and herbs. A taste of distant shores. You try a bite and your eyes widen. The sharpness of the lemon cuts the oil, the honey soothes it, and the herb. What is it mint tarragon finishes the bite with brightness? It's astonishing. It's fast food alchemy. You look around. This is still a city of stone and soot, of hard lives and hungry mouths. But between the grindstones and gutters, between the prayers and pottage, this world also makes room for joy, for flavor, for invention. And there's still more to find. Somewhere ahead, someone is selling braggot, a honeyed ale brewed with herbs and flatbreads blackened just at the edges. You follow the scent and sound drawn again into the heartbeat of the streets, into the next layer of this strange, familiar world. The scent of braggot pulls you onward, deep, sweet, and herbal, like mead's stronger, stranger cousin. It's the kind of smell that makes your chest ache with curiosity before you even get a taste. You wind through the square and find the source, a barrel propped on a slanted stand, slowly dripping a golden liquid into clay cups lined up along a plank. The brewer is a woman with sleeves pushed to her shoulders and hands stained purple from elderberries. She ladles a portion into a small cup, and you bring it to your lips. It's thick, rich with honey spiced with ale hoof or bog myrtle, maybe both. It clings to your mouth like syrup, but leaves behind a gentle bite of bitterness. This isn't a drink you chug. It's a sipper, warming, calming, with just enough edge to keep your feet steady and your belly soft. Brewers used to add herbs before hops were common, she explains, leaning against the barrel. Everything from thyme to wormwood. Whatever kept the brew lively and the drinker upright. She smiles. You nod, understanding more than you thought you would. She hands you a slab of bread to pair with the drink, a flat loaf speckled with toasted seeds and black at the crust. Baked in a low stone oven, no rise, no yeast, just grain and time and heat. The outer edge is crisp like bark. The center is chewy and sour. A peasant's loaf and perfect. Around her, a few men and women are settling in with their meals, flatbread topped with melted cheese and wild herbs slathered in lard and sprinkled with chopped onions. Slices of hard sausage served with mustard thick as tar. Pickled eggs cut in half and served atop mashy peas. All eaten with fingers, all hot from fire or warm from the hand. The smell of garlic drifts from a nearby cart where a cook is preparing ramson cakes, a fritter made from wild garlic barley meal and fat pressed flat and fried to a crisp edge. You take one and chew it slowly. The garlic is sweet, not sharp, earthy. It lingers in your mouth like a song. This part of the city feels older somehow, less organized, more instinctive. The streets curve where they want, not where logic demands. Houses lean, carts jostle, cats sleep in doorways like they own the place. And here the food reflects that improvised, intuitive born of habit rather than recipe. At the corner, a man with a stained cap and a thick mustache tends a brazier, where small birds, sparrows, starlings are skewered and roasting. They're basted with vinegar, honey, and a trace of rosemary. You glance at him, eyebrow raised. "Pigeon's too pricey," he says, shrugging. "These'll do." He hands you one, and you nibble cautiously around the bones. The meat is small but intense, tangy, slightly charred with more crunch than chew. Not for every taste, but he's right, they'll do. They've been doing for centuries. Not far off, a group of traveling players is unpacking props beside a cart-turned stage. One of them juggles apples while another sharpens a knife on a whetstone with a theatrical grimace. You catch a line of gossip. A nobleman is rumored to be sneaking down to the markets disguised as a monk, just to buy street sausages without scrutiny. It doesn't surprise you. These sausages, after all, are more than meat. They're memory wrapped in casing. You spot one vendor grilling them over coals, short links, thick-skinned and deeply browned, cut in halves and served in hot buns carved from leftover trencher bread. He adds a smear of onion jam and a handful of sour herbs. It's medieval street meat at its finest, savory, pungent, hot enough to burn the roof of your mouth if you're not careful. You take one, hold it with both hands, and eat slowly. The jam is made with ale and leeks, sweet and soft. The sausage is heavy with mace, coriander, and just enough fat to leave your fingers shiny. No mustard, no ketchup, just history. A beggar nearby sings softly to himself, balancing a bowl of hot broth on his lap, and you catch a phrase, "A belly full keeps the cold from creeping." It rings true. You pass a booth run by two old women who sell toasted beans roasted over hot pebbles until split and seasoned with ground salt and herbs. They're scooped into waxed paper cones and eaten like chestnuts. You crunch on a few as you walk the texture like popcorn, the flavor sharp with lovage and rosemary. Past them, someone's baking thin pancakes on a slate slab, flipping them quickly with a stick. These are crepes of rye and egg filled with stewed plums or grated apple and folded into quarters. The vendor nods to you and offers one no coin needed, just a nod. You accept warm cloth wrapping it as you bite. The fruit inside is tart, the pancake soft and just shy of burnt. Perfect. A boy tugs at your sleeve and offers you a wooden skewer, roasted mushrooms brushed with oil, and crushed garlic strung between bits of fried dough. "Forest bites," he says proudly. You give him a coin and a smile and take a bite. The mushrooms are meaty, the dough crisp, and together they taste like campfire and moss and breakfast. Then a slow hum grows behind you, music. Faint at first, then fuller. Someone plays a lute. A tambourine shakes in rhythm. A feast is forming not of formality, but of rhythm and noise and shared hunger. People gather around a fire. Potatoes, small purple and new roast on skewers, their skins blistered, their centers soft and steaming. Someone ladles hot mead into wooden cups. Someone else tears bread and passes it around like communion. A woman spoons goose fat into barley cakes and presses them with a heated iron, turning them crisp and golden. And for a moment this feels timeless. No walls, no feasts and castles, just hands and fire and food. The true heart of fast eating, not the speed, but the shared moment. The pause between toil. You sit, sip, bite, smile. The sky is fading to evening again. The bells will soon call for vespers, but the eating, like the city, like history, goes on. Just beyond the firelight, you hear a merchant calling out the last of his stock pies, filled with mint and peas, crisped goose skin folded into bread, a jar of pickled crab apples for the sweet and the sour, he says. And as you rise, stretch, and follow the sound, you realize there's one thing you've yet to try. Cold meat jelly. Savory, mysterious, and waiting around the next bend. The final bell of the day is ringing when you reach the stall with the jelly. Its sound ripples across the rooftops, low, patient, final. The sun is tilting now, gold slipping into orange, then edging into blue. Shadows stretch long, and the bustle slows. But in this little corner of the square, one cart still draws curious glances and wrinkled noses. Cold meat jelly. It glistens like glass in the fading light, arranged in round molds and thick slabs, some translucent, some cloudy, all of them wobbling faintly in time with the table's sway. At first glance, it looks more like something out of an apothecary's workshop than a kitchen. Yet people queue. They're not deterred by the strangeness. They've eaten this before. They've come for it. The woman behind the table is brisk and confident, carving neat slices from one of the molded rounds. Jellied pig's foot, she says, placing a portion onto a round of toasted oat bread. Set with the bone like it should be. You accept a slice, unsure what to expect. The jelly is cool to the touch, soft but firm. It glows faintly from the firelight behind her. Within it, shreds of pork, a sliver of carrot, a floating sprig of parsley. You bite in and your jaw braces for resistance, but the jelly melts instantly. The flavor is savory with a sharp brightness from vinegar and herbs. The meat inside is tender and slightly spiced. Not rich, not heavy, just clear, like a soup you can slice. The bread gives it structure, and you find yourself chewing more slowly. Not because it's difficult, but because the food demands it. This isn't a hand pie or a stick of fried dough. It doesn't rush. It cools, the mouth quiets the pace. You eat the rest in silence, watching the others nod in satisfaction. She has more aspic of eel venison and wine jelly, even a vegetable jelly made with leeks and barley set in thickened almond milk. That one's reserved for the local bishop, but she lets you smell it nutty, herbal, faintly sweet. You begin to understand jelly wasn't a joke here. It was prestige, preservation, a craft. You want your meat to last. You suspend it, she says with a wink. Keeps it safe, keeps it beautiful. You thank her and step away, letting your belly settle. The day is leaning into dusk now, and the market has changed once again. Gone is the chaos of the noon rush. What remains are embers, scraps, and last rounds. Nearby, a group of young apprentices is clustered around a cart, ladling out thick, starchy bowls of bean mash, creamy white beans with garlic, crushed herbs, and fried leeks spooned on top like garnish. A spoonful of vinegar brightens it. You try it, still holding the flavor of the aspic in your mouth, and the contrast is lovely, warm, hearty, soft. The very opposite of the cold jelly. The vendor next to them is pressing small oat cakes into rounds, stuffing them with onion and greens before frying them on a flat stone. The smell reminds you of breakfast, though it's long past, and he sells them in pairs for those making their way home. You take one for the road and follow the slow curve of the path toward the town's southern quarter, where a different kind of food has taken over. Not pies, not fritters, not jelly, soup. Not fancy soup, not thick stew, but the kind made with lentils, root vegetables, and the odd shred of yesterday's roast ladled into tin cups and drunk like tea. A woman stirs her pot with a stick, as long as your arms steam rising in columns around her. Her stand is flanked by 3 men leaning on their elbows, sipping wordlessly. You take a cup. The broth is thin but comforting. Carrots, parsnip, parsley root. A touch of ale. You sip it standing up, letting the heat slide down your throat and settle into your stomach like a warm stone. A dog brushes past your leg. You glance down and toss him a crust. He licks his chops, curls by the fire, and begins to sleep. As you keep walking, the lights grow softer. The smell of food begins to fade, replaced by tallow smoke and distant hearths. But then, like a stubborn ember, another scent finds you: nutmeg, pepper, roasted meat. One last booth. This one is small. No cart, no sign. Just a board laid across 2 barrels and a small fire where a boy turns skewers slowly, patiently, like he's done it for hours. His meat is spiced thighs of game bird from the smell, coated in a mixture of ground mustard seed, nutmeg, and breadcrumbs. It crackles over the coals. He offers one with a nod. You take it without a word. The heat sears your fingers through the skewer, but the smell is irresistible. You take a bite. It is one of the best things you've tasted all day. Crisp exterior, juicy interior. Heat from the fire, heat from the spice. A balance only achieved by instinct, not recipe. The boy says nothing, just nods again. You nod back. Behind him, resting on a plank, are the last of his offerings: stuffed onions, baked whole, hollowed out, and filled with grains, sausage, and crushed nuts. He gives you one wrapped in cabbage leaf. You hold it like a precious thing, not yet ready to bite. And as you wander away from the firelight, the sky now navy above you know, this night of eating is nearly over. But not entirely. Not until you find the bread pudding made from spiced wine and soaked crusts, the kind they serve by lamplight, with laughter in the corners of bakeries long after the ovens are cold. That's where you're headed now. The southern lane leads you away from the bustle and into the warmth of smaller spaces. Here homes and shops blend, and the distinction between kitchen and stall blurs. Windows glow with firelight. Doors stand ajar, just wide enough for heat and conversation to spill out. You follow the scent of wine and spice, subtle, now not loud like meat or fried dough. It drifts like a whisper from a narrow doorway, where a small board hangs bearing the symbol of a loaf over a rising sun mark of a baker. But this isn't the bread for breakfast kind of place. This is where the scraps are magic. Inside the walls are low, and the air is dense with warmth and cinnamon. The baker, older, bent-backed and dusted from brow to boot, waves you in without looking up. He's slicing cubes from a wide dish, cooling on the sill, deep brown and gold at the edges, soft and jiggling in the center. It's bread pudding, but not the kind you know. This one is made from stale trenchers, soaked in claret, spiced red wine, then baked slowly with honey raisins and dried apple. A touch of nutmeg, a crack of black pepper, and just enough egg to hold it all together. He hands you a square wrapped in cloth and nods. You take a bite and your teeth sink through the softest, richest interior, like fruitcake's ancient cousin, each flavor revealing itself slowly. First the wine warm and tangy, then the cinnamon and honey, then the chew of fruit. The pepper shows up last, just a hint like a nudge. End of day cake, he says, good for sleep, better for memory. You finish the slice in silence. It feels final somehow. A punctuation mark on the sentence of this long, delicious day. Yet the world around you keeps moving. From the rear of the shop, someone brings out a tray of spice nuts, little balls of flour, honey, almond, and black pepper, hard as pebbles and meant to be sucked, not chewed. You pocket one for later, tucking it alongside the damson paste still wrapped in fig leaf. You'd forgotten about that. It feels like a prize. Back on the street, the lanterns burn low. Oil runs thin. The moon now rules the rooftops, casting crooked shadows where chimneys lean like gossiping old men. But even now, not everyone sleeps. You spot a candle still burning in a small window, the silhouette of a woman behind it, tending a shallow pan. You approach curious and find a single-serving vendor making milk puddings, custards thickened with flour, and honey flavored with rose water, and served in cooled bowls of earthenware. She lets you try a spoonful. The surface jiggles like a water basin. The flavor is gentle, floral, smooth, made to calm the nerves, to line the stomach, to slow the blood. She serves it cold, though it once would have been warm. Around the corner, a man sells roasted barley sweetmeats, crushed and mixed with syrup, flattened into wafers and dried hard. Not quite candy, not quite bread. Something in between. He tells you soldiers used to carry them in pouches and soften them in water before chewing. A boy nearby is selling toasted breadcrumbs tossed with butter and crushed dates. Poor boys crumble, he says with a grin. You eat it with your fingers. You do, and it sticks sweetly to your fingertips. Salty, sticky sweet. A few crumbs fall and the wind carries them away. As you walk, you notice how the sounds of the market have softened to something closer to a lullaby, just whispers, snorts from sleeping animals, and the clink of a pot being washed somewhere behind a closed door. But just when you think the feast is finally finished, You catch one last vendor still packing up a soft-faced man with wide sleeves and a careful hand placing jars into crates. You ask what he sells. Spiced wine syrup, he says. For those who can't afford wine but still want the taste. A spoon in hot water, and there you are, comfort without coin. He gives you a sample, just a drop on a wooden spoon. It's thick like honey, sharp with vinegar, and heavy with clove and cinnamon. You close your eyes and imagine sipping it slowly by the fire. And then, truly, it's quiet. You round the final corner, and the lane opens toward the inn yard where your evening began. The coals are down to ash. The meat stalls are shuttered. The cats now rule the alleys. The scents are fading, not gone, but folded into the stone where they'll sleep until morning brings them back. You sit on a bench beside the gate, pulling your cloak tighter. Your breath fogs in the air, and as your head leans back against the wall, you smile. Because today you didn't just eat, you traveled. Through spice and fire, through invention and scarcity. Through the hands of strangers who never knew your name but fed you all the same. And somewhere deep in your pocket, the last spice nut waits. But maybe not tonight. Morning again, but not quite the same. This time you wake not to clamor, but to silence. The inn yard where you drifted to sleep is still the ashes of the cook fires, cold, and the soft gray light of dawn barely brushing the cobblestones. You stretch not stiffly, but slowly, the way one does, after deep, contented sleep, the kind only a full belly and a quiet city can grant. You rise and begin walking with no real aim, your path not driven by hunger now, but by habit. The winding lanes are empty, but not lifeless. The city breathes differently at this hour. Beneath shutters and behind doors, pots begin to boil, dough begins to rise. You hear the scrape of an oven door, the clink of ladles, the sigh of a baker settling his bread into the coals. You walk until you smell it, sweetness, soft and faint like sugar catching in the air. It leads you to a side street where a woman is kneeling beside a clay oven built into the wall. She's pulling out trays of Panter's bread, a soft loaf made with egg and milk, usually reserved for feast days or the wealthier homes. But here it is, crust golden, and yielding steam escaping from the ends like sighs. She slices you a piece and offers it without a word. You bite in, and it melts on your tongue, the richness of the egg balanced by a hint of spiced nutmeg, perhaps, or mace. She drizzles a little honey over the second slice and hands it to you again. You don't even speak. There's no need. Some food asks for quiet. The lane warms as the sun lifts higher. People begin to stir. A small boy hauls a bucket of water over a stoop. A girl drapes cloths across a railing. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster crows late. You nibble your bread and walk slowly now past homes still dark and windows glowing gently. Around another bend, the vendors begin setting up, not loudly, not yet, but with soft rhythm. One woman unwraps a bundle of pickled eggs, placing each one gently in a shallow bowl lined with cloth. A man beside her arranges bundles of wrapped flatbreads, each one stamped with an emblem from a carved wooden press, a sun, a bird, a spiral. He says it helps customers remember which is which, mint and cheese, garlic, and mustard seed, dried fish with vinegar onions. You purchase one of the mint and cheese, biting into the cooled bread, and discovering the cheese has ripened overnight, sharper now and more satisfying. The mint lifts the bite. You chew and follow the curve of the road past the brewers where breakfast ales are poured into mugs that clink with every sleepy footstep. And just ahead, a strange sight, A circle of merchants not selling but sharing. A group of tradespeople seated on low stools passing around one large trencher filled with pottage. They dip in with spoons, no words exchanged. You're invited in with a nod, and you accept sitting between a carpenter and a man with ink-stained fingers who smells of wax and parchment. The pottage is simple peas, onions, leeks, a touch of mustard. The bread beneath it has gone soft from the broth, and you eat it last when it's nearly falling apart in your hand. There is no talk of ingredients, no praise, just the act of eating together slowly, gratefully. Someone passes around hard pears soaked in wine and pepper, and you bite into one tough but fragrant, spicy, and slightly bitter. It forces your jaw to work. You like that. You like being reminded of the labor behind sweetness. Once the meal is done, you walk again, returning to familiar ground. The fishmonger's stall is empty now, but the scent of smoked eel lingers. The pie cart is gone, but crumbs still dot the stone beneath where it stood. The cookshop door hangs open, fires banked a kettle still warm. You pause there and breathe in the scent of yesterday. You could name every flavor now, every spice. You could list them like an old song: rosemary, mustard, almond, saffron, clove, garlic, nutmeg, cider, leeks, mint, pepper, vinegar, onion. You know their footprints. You know how they walk through food and memory alike. And then, almost without realizing it, you turn toward the chapel square where you first tasted spiced bread, toward the booth where fish was skewered and dusted with parsley, toward the alley where the girls fried French toast on slate. You're not hungry, not really, but you stop at the bread stall anyway and ask for a slice of sweet rye. The woman cuts it, thick, hands it over with a look that says she remembers you. You thank her, take a bite, and find yourself back at the beginning. Because that's what food does. It loops. It remembers. It brings you home, even if home is a place made of time you never lived in. The sky is high now. The market pulses gently beneath it. And you full again, in every sense, let the quiet carry you. There's only one more corner to turn. One more taste before night falls once more. The last corner turns you gently back into the city's belly. Not the market square, not the chapel yard, but a place quieter and somehow deeper, an intersection of side streets where things end and begin without ceremony. The light here is softer, filtered through hanging cloths and overhanging beams, and from a distance you hear it, the soft murmur of a cook humming to himself, the hiss of something in a pan, the faint tap of spoon on clay. You follow without rushing. The stall is barely a stall. It leans against the wall of a stable, smoke curling from a hole in the makeshift roof. One man stands over the fire, tending what looks like the very last of the day's batter. What's left of the flour, the milk, the egg, whatever was saved or scraped from pots. A child sits nearby, fanning the coals with a strip of leather. The man glances up, sees you, and says simply, "Last one." You nod, not needing more. He ladles the thin batter into a shallow iron pan, lets it bubble at the edges, then drops a spoonful of something dark and sticky into the center, a fruit mash of dates, raisins, and honey by the smell of it. Then he folds the edges and crisps the outside and slides it onto a worn wooden plate. No garnish, no price, just warmth. You sit on a low step and hold it in your hands, feeling the heat seep through the crust and into your fingers. It smells like endings, like hearth and rest, like everything you've tasted today folded into one final bite. You chew slowly, and it gives easily crisp edges, soft middle, the fruit sweet but not loud. You let your eyes drift closed between bites. The sounds of the city have changed again, quieter still. A lull more than a silence. The horses are bedded. The bells have stilled. The shadows have grown full. As you finish, the cook begins to pack his things. The coals are left to smolder. The child gathers cloths and buckets. No one speaks. There's no need. You stand and stretch. The stars above you are pale but clear. The wind has turned gentle, almost coaxing. You wrap the last of your bread in cloth and tuck it away, though you may not eat it. It's enough to know it's there. And as you step slowly through the lanes, now familiar even in fading light, you feel the story settling behind you, around you. Not just the story of food, but of people, of sharing, of invention born from hardship and flavor born from instinct. Fast food wasn't born in drive-thrus or branded wrappers. It lived here first in open fires and lidded pots and aprons and ash and fingers and bread and bites taken between bells. You pass the chapel, empty now, past the market, swept clean, past the eel cart folded away, and still the scents linger in the stone. You breathe it all in one last time, and then quietly you walk home. So now, full and content, your journey is ending. Not in a bed of feather pillows or under silk sheets, but in the gentle quiet of a medieval evening, with bread in your pocket and spice on your breath. The streets behind you are silent now, and the city sleeps in layers, stone upon straw, dreams upon embers. Your feet ache just enough to remind you you've walked a long way. Your belly is soft and full. Your mind is slow, winding, almost drowsy with the memory of 100 tastes. You've touched the world through its kitchens, through the hands of cooks who never knew your name but welcomed you all the same. You've tasted sweetness spun from scarcity, warmth from hardship, and flavor from places that never knew excess. The fast food of the past wasn't fast in the way we know it. It was fast because life moved and people had to eat with it. But still, it had beauty. Still, it had care. Still, it had joy. So now let the last sounds fade. The hiss of pans, the bell of the church tower, the crunch of bread crust in your hand. Let the lanterns dim and the soft hush of sleep settle over the rooftops. You've eaten your way through time. You've wandered with taste. And now your story, this quiet, lovely, delicious story, can rest too. Sleep well, traveler. Let your dreams be warm and filled with spice.